Hello and welcome to another Sonic review. My name's Tosh, and in today's piece we're going to be taking a look at the Apollo Twin MKII from Universal Audio. Now, in a previous piece we did a launch video for this, so a lot of the detail on this you can find there, but the point in this review is really I've had a chance to live with it for a few weeks and to use it in anger on a few sessions, and I'm just going to give you my general impressions of what it's like to work with. Okay, if you're not familiar with this, I'll give you a quick recap. This is the Apollo Twin is Universal Audio's latest addition to their lineup of high-resolution audio interfaces. So the Apollo Twin boasts 2 inputs, 6 outputs, and this particular version comes with quad-core DSP processing. It can do up to 192 kilohertz at 24 bits and has a whole load of additional features compared to the previous model, which includes a built-in Talkback system and some extra monitoring features. Also, those 2 mic inputs feature the upgraded A to D converters. So we looked at the Apollo 8P a while ago, and that new generation of converters has found its way into this unit now, offering even higher resolution and lower noise. So there you go, that's the background to this thing. Now, it's already been kicking up quite a fuss with various reviewers. It won Best in Show at NAMM. So shall we see what the fuss is all about? Okay, so just a quick physical overview of the unit. You've got this front panel here, which has a set of multifunction controls dominated by this big, very tactile knob and a series of buttons whose functions vary depending on the mode the unit's in. At the front here, there are 2 TRS sockets. And the first one on this side is the DI in, which is assigned to channel 1 only. And then on this side, we've got a headphone output. Coming around the back, we've got interfacing and I/O connections. So first up here, we've got an optical input. And now that can either be ADAT, so you can send an extra 8 channels into the unit, or it can be SPDIF, which will give you 2 channels. Next to that, you've got the Thunderbolt connector. So that connects directly to your Mac or PC, or if you've got another Apollo unit, you can connect it to that and then daisy chain it to your computer. Below that, we have the power connector. Nice thing about that is that it's locking, so you plug it in and twist it, and you can't accidentally pull it out, trip over it. Next to that, we have analog outputs. We've got the main monitor outs here, and then line 3 and 4, your additional outputs. And then finally, we've got a pair of combi connectors which give you your analog in, so they can either be mic or line inputs. So in terms of overall design, a couple of points I'd like to make. I think in general, the unit's been very well thought out in terms of the layouts. So, you know, it's a good size. It's not too big, not too small, so you're not fiddling around with tiny buttons. That big multifunction knob, very tactile, very easy to use. The displays are clear. And in terms of the size of the unit, it's not excessively large. You know, it's big enough to sling in your rucksack and move around with, but at the same time, it's not too small and lightweight that it'll slip around on your desk, and that's also aided by the fact that there's some non-slip pads underneath. So one big new feature unique to the Mark II version of the Twin is the Talkback system. Now, here, this little hole, that's actually a mic. That's the Talkback mic, which is operated by this switch here, when in monitor mode, I should mention. So in order to use Talkback, just push and talk, and you'll see that I've currently routed it to the monitors, so the level's coming up there. And if we jump over to console, there's a dedicated Talkback channel strip, and there you can see, I switch it off, it disappears. If I want to latch it on, I do a momentary press and it's permanently engaged. You can also add inserts, so any of the UAD plugins you can apply to that channel strip, and you can send it. Currently it's got a center headphones, but through the I/O matrix, we can route it just about anywhere. So let's demonstrate that. Get this plugin out of the way. If I just expand the number of inputs I've got there, and we go in here, Talkback 1. And now we have my input 9 is the Talkback mic, and that will appear in my DAW. And I can use that to record whatever the mic's picking up. Why would you do that? Well, one possible idea is if you want to sketch out an idea while you're on the move and you don't want to set up a microphone, that's a very handy way to quickly grab it. So one thing I did notice in use is that there is a bit of a click associated with switching the system in and out. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that that mic is very close to this button, and it's a clicky button, and that's a sensitive mic. It's one thing worth bearing in mind, because any kind of noise you make will get picked up, and that will appear in the artist's foldback, which they may not like. Right, so I'd like to just cover a bit of the monitoring functionality of the system, and this is something I'm particularly like about it, because for my workflow I tend to change monitoring levels, switch to alternative speakers, use mono, and this puts all that functionality at my fingertips. Now with the rack mount units, unless they're mounted right next to your desk, it's quite hard to actually, find the controls and do all that. Whereas this is right under my fingertips. Before I'd tend to use console and use the mouse a lot more, but now it kind of speeds up the workflow, being able to click through everything. So just to kind of illustrate what we've got, if we get this mix on the go, you've got you switch to monitor mode, and then you can mute with that button. You can switch to mono. You can select an alternative pair of speakers. We haven't got one plugged in, but that's how you do it. And you can dim, obviously, by a calibrated amount, which you'd set here on console. For me, this is a major benefit of this system. I'd considered buying a separate monitor controller before, but now to be able to have that functionality into the interface is a real bonus. Another point to make here is that this monitor button switches between your monitor outputs and your headphone outputs, so you've got independent level control for both of those. So let's now take a look at some of the preamp functionality of the unit. If you press this button here on the left, that switches from monitor mode into preamp mode. And this button is actually multifunctional, so it allows you to choose between the two channels, channel 1, channel 2. And then depending on whether you've got mic or line selected, you get different options down here. So looking at channel 2, we're currently on mic input. If I switch this button, it changes it to a line input. And then you can see we've got high pass filter and phase flip activated. If I switch to mic mode, you get a few extra options. As well as the filter and phase, you've got phantom power, which ramps in, and a pad as well. Channel 1's currently set to high Z, which is automatically selected when you plug into the DI input. Now I've currently set up a Unison plugin on channel 1, so I can show you how that integrates with the controls on here. Okay, so if we just go over to the console window, you can see there's my Apollo Twin channel 1, and I've got an Ampeg B15N emulation plugin there in the Unison slot. So the Unison slot means that it's you can now interact with the hardware controls and the software plugin. So if we put that channel into Unison mode, we do that by holding the preamp button down. The channel light starts flashing, and that tells you that it's in Unison mode. And what you'll notice is that on the screen, a little dots come up next to some of the controls. So normally with the mouse you can click on those, but the hardware controller is now also assigned. So this makes setting up some of the parameters very easy. If I just pick up this bass that we happen to have lying around, I can demonstrate how easy this whole system is to use. So switching between the two inputs, and then click again, and it sets me on the input volume control. And then if I click again, I'm on the power soak control, so I can drive by setting the input volume up to maximum and then reducing the level there. So it's very easy to control your sound without having to jump to the mouse and go through all these individual controls. However, it would be kind of good to see this control extend to the other tone controls, so being able to select the EQ and then twist through using this, so I could have a completely mouse-free experience whilst playing. Okay, so that's just a quick demonstration of the Unison system in action, and of course there's a whole load of different plugins that you can use in that manner, so guitar amp sims and classic preamp emulations. Another point I'd like to make now is the whole thing of cascading Apollo units. So you can link up to 6 UAD devices over Thunderbolt. What we've got here is an Apollo 8P and the Apollo Twin, and they're both plugged into the MacBook there through the Thunderbolt ports. If I just switch that on, there's a little bit of communication that happens between the two units as they power up, and then eventually what should happen is the 8P will appear as additional inputs here on console. And there we go. So now I have a system that has 10 Unison preamps and the additional features of the Apollo 8P, but I can still control that from here. So my main monitor outputs are controlled via this system. There's also a function button here, which I didn't mention earlier, but that can be assigned to the functionality of the equivalent button over here on the 8P. You'll notice that this is the master because the monitor control features of the 8P are now disabled. Unfortunately, you can't control the preamps of the 8P from the Twin. You still have to use this push button here. You can see that's selecting the different preamps, whereas the preamp control here only works for, if I switch it into that mode, for the Apollo Twin, but that's a small detail. One thing that would have been nice actually is the control here on the 8P, as well as being a rotary, it's a push button. This isn't, it's just a rotary, so there's no additional control in there, which could be a nice way to integrate maybe switching between some of the other parameters in the Unison system. But what you can do is make use of some of the additional outputs from the 8P to provide yourself with an extra pair of alternative monitor outputs. So if we go into settings, we've currently got the Apollo Twin as the master, and you can see I've only got an option for one alternative output, which is that 3 and 4 there. If I now swap these over, so the 8P becomes the master in the system, I've still got control of the output gain, and you can see here how that's controlling the monitor output from there. And I can select the 2 alt buses, and what that means now is from the Apollo Twin, clicking Alt gives me Alt 1, and then clicking this function button, which has now become active, allows me to select Alt 2. So I've got 3 sets of monitors I can switch between. So again, that really adds to the workflow capabilities of this device. So with the 2 systems linked up like this, obviously their processing power is combined. Now you may not need all that power. Here we've got a quad Apollo Twin with a quad processor in it, and the Apollo 8's a quad system as well. So if you do already have a unit or 2 and you just like the additional front end features of the Apollo Twin, there's an entry-level version which comes with a single processor. Then there's a dual version, and then this is the top of the line with a quad processor in it. And it's worth noting that the quad processor as a standalone system is capable of running some pretty hefty mixes. The 2 systems combined will allow you to do all sorts of crazy things like running, lots of inserts on your input signal chain across multiple inputs. And obviously in the mix you can run some very complex signal paths with lots of plugins on them if you wish. So that's just a bit of an overview really of what this system's capable of. Now I've spent the last few weeks working with it, and there are a few things that I really like about it. Probably principally I work between places, so I've got studio at home and production room, and I used to lug around my Apollo Quad, which was a bit of a pain, whereas this unit I can take it, chuck it in the rucksack and hop over to the other studio, and I can do most of the things that I needed to do when I was using the Apollo Quad with this system. So it gives me the quad-core processing power plus a couple of inputs that I can track through. And for me, that's a big advantage. And then being able to bring it back into the studio, hook it up with the rack mount systems, use it as a desktop controller, and also take advantage of the extra processing power has been a real bonus. So overall, I really like this unit, and I'm considering getting one. I might not necessarily go for the quad-core unit given that I already have quad processing and I'm not reaching the limits of that at the moment. So if you don't already own an Apollo interface and you've been thinking about getting on board for a while now, this Apollo Twin represents a great way in. There are several options from the single core unit all the way up to this quad core processor. And equally, if you already own a rack system such as the 8P and you're looking to expand your processing power, your I/O count, have the flexibility of a desktop control system, as well as the ability to take this unit out on the road and work remotely, then equally there are options there for you depending on your processing power requirements and your budget. Okay, so the Apollo Twin Mark II is shipping now. The prices should be rolling by at the bottom of the screen as I speak, and that's about all I have time for now. I hope you've enjoyed the review and found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you, bye.